Hello, my name is Kelvin Carter and thank you for watching. I'm here on the campus of WRAL News where I have the opportunity to interview one of the reporters slash morning time anchors, Michelle Marsh. And she was able to give us some tips and guidelines for students who are trying to pursue a degree in mass communications after college. Let's take a listen. Alright, my name is Kelvin Carter and I'm here with Michelle Marsh who works at WRAL TV. And Michelle, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So, where are you from, Michelle?
My hometown is Queens, New York.
Okay.
I grew up there and stayed in New York State until I moved for my third job, and that was in Atlanta.
Your third job. So where'd you graduate college?
I graduated from Syracuse University. I majored in broadcast journalism there. I was in the Newhouse program. And once I graduated, I got my first job in a small city called Binghamton, New York. It's in western New York. And then from there, I went to Albany, New York. And then I finally left the Big Apple and headed south for Atlanta.
Down to Atlanta. So in New York, your first station, what were you doing?
I was what they now call a MMJ. I was shooting my own stories, editing, writing, tracking, doing everything. And that was back in the day when we didn't even have GPS systems in the car. We had map books. And so you'd have to flip the pages to try to find.
Age.
Yeah, it's so weird to think that, if I had gotten into the business just a few years later, I would have saved myself some of that grief.
So what was your goal coming out of college? I'm guessing your first job was to be a reporter?
Yeah. So I was sending out, again, giving away my age, VHS tapes, because that was the way they did it. You made copies of VHS tapes and you put them in the mail and you sent them out to news directors. So I'd sent my work to stations all across the country, and it took about, a good 7 months for me to find my first job. So in between I was working odd jobs, but I didn't want to settle for a job in the news business but not doing what I want to, because I know it's so hard once you're in. If you're not really pursuing what you want to do, it's hard to then devote attention to also being a reporter in addition with your full-time job being a producer. I know a lot of people try that thinking it's great to get your foot in the door. It may work for some people, but for me, I knew that I would lose focus and probably not be able to fulfill my dream of being a reporter.
So for somebody who is trying to get into their career after graduation, you said it took you 7 months to find your first job. If it takes people longer, what advice do you give them?
It can be discouraging because you get so many rejections, and I was back home. So it's like you're back home, your friends in other careers, they're moving out of their house, they're starting off, they have this independence. It can be discouraging, but I would say keep pushing if you really feel passionate about it, and find ways to still stay in contact with people in the industry so that you can find ways to keep your work fresh. I was fortunate that I had a sister who was a reporter, so halfway through, I felt like, okay, my work needs to be a little better. I was able to go to her station where she worked and kind of switch up my tape and improve some of the pieces that I had on it. So it's good to maintain connections with people that you've met through internships for that purpose.
So networking. Speaking of networking, you are also part of National Association of Black Journalists, right?
Right.
How do you think that is beneficial?
I think it's great. I tend to go there a lot of times just to see friends. A lot of times we don't see each other throughout the year because everyone's so busy and has their own schedule. But that's the one time in the year that you get to catch up with a lot of people and learn about what they're working on, the projects that they've been working on, and also maybe to get some context for, hey, any openings coming up in your shop. So it's a good way to kind of have an inside look at what's happening within the industry that may not be apparent just from looking at a website. Things.
So do you attach your passion with your work, with news? Do you somehow connect it? Or you rather keep it separate? I'd rather, have my own time, watch a game.
Well, I mean, for example, when we had coverage of the ACC tournament, I volunteered to cover it because I like basketball. So there are ways to intertwine them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So you're still able to do your passion as
Yeah.
well as work. So it's not all about work, right?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it is.
It is.
Because you got to make deadlines and, have stories written so that they're ready for air. You can't just coast and
Right.
enjoy the game. Actually, a lot of times when you go to the games, you don't even really get to enjoy it as a fan because you may have to watch the game from some uncomfortable room where you're far away from all the action. You're not actually out there. You might pop in and out to see what's going on and get a feel for the crowd, but you don't get to sit out there and enjoy it.
And being outside of the newsroom, since you are a public figure now, do you have a personal life,
Yeah.
do you have to separate it? Dealing with social media and stuff, do you have to separate your professional from your personal, or?
Yeah. I mean, I always say I don't post anything that if it were on the front page of the newspaper, I would be embarrassed of. So that goes for pictures, comments, or anything like that. So I always keep that in mind. So the stuff that I post on my personal page versus the station page, they're really not that much different because a lot of times it's a lot to keep track of, and it can be, you can post something that you think is on your private page and then someone tags you or something, and then somehow it shows up in the timeline. So it's really confusing, and I can't really keep track of all the settings that you have to change to make sure that doesn't happen. So I just try to avoid it altogether and just make sure that whatever I post on either page, that it's something that if it were to get out, I wouldn't be mortified.
Right. 2 more questions. So what is your challenge in the newsroom as a woman?
Challenge in the newsroom? I think, sometimes people, when you have an opinion about something, it can be characterized as something differently than if someone else had an opinion about something. It can be characterized as bossy or trying to take charge, whereas if somebody else came up with a suggestion, and sometimes I've seen this happen, they've come up with my same suggestion, and it's like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm just like, wait a minute, I just said that. So I've seen that happen. And, it's just like a learning experience, and it's something that you're just aware of. You try to change those around you or help them change, and you try to change your approach. Maybe you make you attempt to express yourself in a different way, but I've seen where, I've made ideas or suggestions, and then when someone else makes it, the reception is different.
Yeah. Well, that's Michelle Marsh from WRAL TV, and I appreciate you for spending time with me to talk.
No problem. I hope you get an A.
I hope so, too. All right, thank you.